I've been a Rhode Island state trooper for 6 years now, and I think one of the worst investigations I've ever been a part of was actually one of my first. I guess it hit me harder because I was such a rookie. A lot of guys say their first bad ones are like that, but most of those guys got closure. I didn't. It started out with a fatal traffic accident on Highway 1 out near Narragansett. Some idiot on a motorcycle had been driving the wrong way down a highway and had smashed right into a mother of 3 coming the other way. Scattered them both like jimmies all over the road. Since the investigating officer was tied up with a ton of paperwork, me and my superior officer had to go deliver the news of the motorcyclist's death to their next of kin. Only from what I heard, it wasn't your average case of death by dangerous driving. At some point, the motorcyclist banged a Yui and began driving the opposite way. He might have been drunk or high. We wouldn't have known until toxicology came back, but the crash scene investigator had noticed something very strange. Although the guy was caught a few miles back doing around 70, the CSI said that there was no way that he'd hit the woman's car doing anything less than $190. He'd seen plenty of head-on collisions in the 70s range, and this wasn't one of them. The damage to both the front end of the sedan as well as the motorcycle itself was completely catastrophic, and our investigator figured that it was some kind of crazy way of taking their own life. Take someone with me as I go kind of deal. Either way, we still had to go deliver the news, and we had to do it in a way befitting the occasion, you know? No mention of him taking his own life, smashing into the mom, nothing like that. It took the coroner a while to get an ID on a biker, but in the end, we got one. And in turn, we got the address of the house that he shared with his wife and kid. The address came back as a match to this big old house in an upscale neighborhood, so we drove over in the early evening to try and make sure that someone would be home at our time of calling. Now looking back, this is the first part that really started to raise some alarm bells. Usually speaking, if a person dies in a car accident in the early hours of the morning, someone reports them missing a few hours later. It's usually a family member, girlfriend, or boyfriend who worries about their unusually tardy worker, but sometimes it's the person's employer. We might not find a body until after this report has been made, but this makes identifying a body much easier because then we can just draw from the list of recently reported missing persons. I'm not saying we never get cases where a person has no one to report them missing. That happens too, and it's sad as hell. But they tend to be homeless people, drug addicts, and sometimes old folks. People unfortunate enough to be on the bottom rungs of society due to sheer bad luck or their own dumb decisions. But then, to have some wealthy suburban father die in an accident and not a single person reports them missing, something's going on. We see 2 cars parked in the driveway, so we're 99% sure someone is home, but when we rang the doorbell, there was no answer. And this happens more than you think. A person might be taking a bath, wearing headphones, doing yard work out back, or have some other perfectly innocent reason for not coming to the door. So, as standard procedure, we went walking around the property looking for any sign of our biker's wife or kids. After finding an unlocked side gate that led into the backyard, we walked up onto this rear porch type thing that had big glass windows, which looked into the home's kitchen. Everything looked exactly how it should be, except over near the refrigerator where all kinds of food items were lying neatly on the floor like little audience members. I pointed it out to my sergeant, who was busy checking one of the home's side windows, and he peered through the glass for a second or two before taking a step back, using a stretched-out arm to bring me with him. He then ordered me to radio dispatch that we had probable cause to force our way into the home, which took me by surprise because I sure as hell didn't see what he was seeing to make him think that. Still, I did as I was told, while my sergeant put his boot to the door until it finally broke open. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, but it took me that long to see what he had been seeing. Or I think a better way to put it would be to ask the question that he had asked himself. Why would someone just empty their fridge out like that? The whole shebang too, even the glass shelves and the plastic drawer. Because they wanted to put something big inside of it. Something real big that they needed to keep from turning rotten and stinking up the place. I'll give you one good guess as to what that thing was. We pulled his wife's body out of the fridge and his infant daughter's out of the freezer. Both had been beaten to a pulp, strangled, and then folded up like pretzels before he stuffed them in there like they didn't matter at all to him. By then, we had a good idea of what had happened, and collecting evidence just felt like a pointless formality. The guy killed his family, and then he went to off himself because he couldn't live with the guilt. It was an open and shut case on the surface, but two things didn't sit right with any of the investigating officers. Number one, the guy had no record, not even so much as a speeding ticket. He also had zero history of mental health issues. Friends and family said the guy didn't have a violent bone in his body, and nothing in his or his wife's cell phone suggested that they had been arguing or even that the relationship had been remotely strained. Number two, when we spoke to family and friends, it became clear that not a single person in our biker's life knew that he even had a motorcycle, not even his bank. We figured it was a recent purchase, as how the hell do you hide a motorcycle? But when we gained access to the guy's bank account statements from the previous 2 years, there was nothing. We checked his checking account, his personal savings account, even the joint account that he shared with his late wife, but again, nothing. This meant that he probably paid for the bike with cash or was given it as a sort of gift. But more importantly, why keep it a secret? And number three, the third point of sort of contention and probably the weirdest of all, was that our biker might have actually known the woman he smashed into. This didn't come out until way after the case was closed, and it was all down to the work of a private investigator hired by the woman's surviving husband. But apparently, our biker and the mom of three had worked in the same Manhattan office building during the late 2000s. It had only been for a brief period of 3 or 4 months, and since they worked on different floors for different companies, there's no evidence that they ever interacted. But our biker slams into a woman on a dark stretch of highway, and it just so happens to be a person that he might have shared an elevator with. I'm not saying that there's something there, but I also wouldn't rule out that there was some kind of connection, which is exactly what the department did. Even if we did get answers to some of these questions, and there was something deeper going on, it's not like we could prosecute a dead guy, you know? So that's where we were left with things, completely in limbo, no closure whatsoever for anyone involved. All that stuff still really plays on my mind, and I guess only 4 or 5 years have passed, but I get the feeling those questions are going to stay with me for a long, long time. But such is life, I guess. Closure is a rare thing, and time isn't the healer people make it out to be. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.